Hello everyone, my name is Lydia and welcome to my studio. I'm glad you could join me today. We're going to be painting Spirit Box on the beach. I'll go over the materials that you'll need and I'll also walk you step by step through the process. I'll also place the description of the materials below the video. If you like this video, please hit the like button and also subscribe. I'll meet you back at the easel. Let's go over the materials we're going to need today to do our painting. I'm working on an 11 by 14 stretched and primed canvas. You can change the size if you'd like. I'm going to be working with a limited color palette today of acrylic paints. I have Alizarin Crimson, Cadmium Yellow Medium, Cobalt Blue, Burnt Sienna, Ivory Black, and Titanium White. The brushes I'm going to be using today are a 1-inch flat brush, a 3/4 inch angled brush, and a small round brush. This happens to be a number 4. You're going to want a piece of chalk to do some sketching today. This is just basic kids chalk. A jar of water to rinse your brushes. A cloth or paper towel to dry your brushes. And a mister bottle to keep everything nice and damp as you work. As an option, you may want to use a ruler because we're going to be drawing some straight lines for our landscape today. So let's get started. So we're going to take a few minutes to get our sketch in. What I've done is I've come down about 3.5 inches from the top of my canvas and made a mark on each side about 3.5 inches down. And then I came down about 1.5 inches below each of those dots and made 2 more dots on each side of the canvas. A couple ways you can think about this. You can think about, oh, here's my halfway point. And so I'm going to go up about halfway between that halfway point, maybe a little below that. Or you can take your ruler out and measure down about 3.5 inches or so on each side, and then come down from that about another 1.5 inches with your ruler. You can get that up there any way that you would like. You can eyeball it, you can use your ruler. So once you get your dots on, you can go ahead and just maybe draw some lines. It doesn't even have to be connected lines, just to indicate where you're going to have the sky. So that's what this is going to be, our sky. And then down below that, we're going to have these other 2 dots connecting, which is going to be our water and a little bit of a sandy area. So what it is, I came down just a little below the line, maybe about 1/2 inch, and I put a little dot there. This is going to be where our path disappears behind some greenery. And I'm going to make a little S-curved path. So let me lift this up a little bit. So in order to make things appear in perspective as though they are getting larger and then disappearing in the distance, you want things to start big and then come together at this little point back here. So I'm going to start back here at my little dot, where it is, and I'm going to start a little curved path. Curves out, and then curves back in, and then comes back down to this corner. And you can make adjustments as you're painting, or you can erase your chalk. That's why it's nice to use chalk. And then I'm going to have that, I'm going to come over just a little bit. So it's maybe about, not even, maybe 1/4 inch off to the left of that. And I'm going to follow that same curve and then come out and maybe bring it in down at this end. And maybe that's about 2.5, 3 inches on this side. So what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to take my 1-inch flat brush, dip it in my jar of water just to get the bristles wet, wipe off any excess. And I'm going to come up and put my sky in. And the sky is just going to be a nice, light, distant blue color. So it's going to be mostly white. So I'm going to pick up my titanium white And then I'm going to pick up a hint of blue and maybe just a tad of the burnt sienna. And I'm just going to come in and just work those colors into my sky. Just a distant sky. Starting at the top, getting the sides of your canvas, and just working that down. Getting all that paint off the brush. And as I move down, I'm going to pick up a little bit more. Not going to rinse the paint that's already there off my brush, but I'm picking up a little bit more of my titanium white, coming below where I just stopped, and making those little X strokes to blend that up into the sky. And just sweeping it straight across. Again, making sure I get my sides. I've just got a little bit of water on the brush, and I'm going to go ahead and blend that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up some of my titanium white, and I still have just a little bit of that blue left in there. I'm going to get a little bit more of my blue, Cobalt Blue, and I'm going to add some of my cadmium yellow to it. And I'm going to do a little more blue. I want it more blue, just so it's a little darker, but with a little greenish tint. So it's a little darker than my sky, a little greenish tint. And I'm going to come in and just fill that in. Get a little water on my brush. And just fill that water area in. Following that line, that top line across. And it's okay if it's not perfect. We are going to have some greenery, but you want to try to get it as straight as you can. And if you'd like, you can put a piece of tape up there. Give yourself an even line. And as I get more to the bottom line down here, I want to add a little bit more burnt sienna to that color, just a little bit. So I'm pulling that color down into my burnt sienna. And I'm going to come in here and just put that down at the bottom. So that just indicates that maybe there's some sand back there mixing into that water. And we're just getting that base color on. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, I'm not rinsing my brush off, I'm just going to come back into my blue. Get a little bit of the yellow, mix it in. So I want this to be a fairly dark green. And I'm just going to come in and put that green. It's got a little yellow mixing in there. Right along in here. Again, we're going to have some greenery in, so it doesn't have to be perfect. And then on this side, do the same thing. Just keep picking up some paint as you need to. I'm going to push some of this off my brush. Just get it there. I'm going to add a little more blue, a little more burnt sienna into that to make it a little darker. A little bit of that cadmium yellow, and just start working that down. Get some water on my brush and just start blending that up. I want it to be a little bit darker than my watercolor, but we are going to go back and add in. So a little more cobalt blue, yellow, and some burnt sienna. path. And pull it out. All along the path. A little more paint. Right in between those two lines. And blend that up. Remember, this is just our base coat. There's going to be bushes and grasses and all sorts of good stuff going on as we move forward. A little more blue. I'm gonna add a little more blue. I'm actually gonna come up here and get some of my alizarin and then pull down some yellow into that. So as I come forward here, it gets a little bit more deep in the green color. Then I'm going to come into this, I'm not rinsing my brush, I'm going to come into my burnt sienna and I'm going to mix that into some of this blue-green color. And I'm just going to come in, starting back here, I can turn my brush and then follow back. There we go. And we're going to come back in with our angle brush later on. We'll be adding some more. I'm going to add a little bit of white, titanium white to that. There we go. Water, come back in. I'm going to get a little bit more of that burnt sienna. Pull into that darker green. I'm going to add a little hint of this red color and bring it on down in here. Pick up a little bit more, push that on. Burnt sienna this time, and just start working it down in here. All right. And once you have it the way that you like it, this is just our base coat. I'm going to let it dry and we'll come back and we'll work on the next step. Okay, so I've rinsed and dried my 1-inch flat brush and I put that away. We're going to be using our small round brush. And so I'm going to put a few little wispy clouds up in this area and then we'll start working to make this look a little bit more blue than green. So I'm going to wet my little brush, my little small round brush, and I want this to be quite wet, so I'm going to come up into my titanium white and I'm going to get a little more water on my brush and roll the brush in. And it gets maybe, you want to work this until you get maybe an inky consistency, a little bit more white. And you can see how it's just kind of running. That's a good sign. A little more water. I'm wiping a little bit of the paint off my brush. Just want a little bit. And I'm going to come up where it starts to go from light to dark, and this is very distant. So I'm just doing a little wiggle motion to put in a few of these clouds in the distance. And I'm just going to make little round circular motions, and then come back and smooth out the bottom. So round circular motions and smooth out the bottom, because this is going to be way back there in the back of the painting. And I may put a few up a little higher. Just nice wispy clouds. And the great thing about clouds, especially these little distant poofy ones, or they can be almost any shape. So I don't have a lot of paint each time. I'm just getting a little bit of paint on the brush. And then I'm going to go a little lower, and I'm just going to make them even smaller. And to these I may add just a hint of my yellow. So come in, just a drop of the yellow, mix that into that white. And as I go lower, I can just add those little hints of yellow clouds in the distance. Then I may go back into the white a little bit and come back in, so they have a hint of yellow, but the white is still going to be up above the yellow a little more. Do a little bit more of my white, just come above where I put the yellow and make little circular motions to smooth that in. Then I'm going to come down a little bit, close to my horizon line. And I'm just going to put a little white there just to smooth it out. There we go. And that's about all I'm going to do with that. I'm going to go ahead now down to this section that's water, and to make it not look like my grassy area, which it's not going to eventually, but I'm going to make it a little more blue. So everything in the distance is going to be lighter. So I'm going to get a little bit of my Cobalt Blue and a lot of the white and just a drop of my yellow. I didn't get a lot of yellow at all because I don't want it to be as green as what's up here. And I'm just going to come back in and just make little horizontal strokes, starting back at the upper line that we drew, which is the horizon line. Get a little more water, roll my brush in the paint, and continue on to make these little horizontal strokes toward the back of the painting where my horizon line is. And as I move a little bit more forward, I'm going to add a little bit more blue so it gets a little darker. See how that looks? There we go. And we'll start making horizontal strokes, and they can be a little bumpy strokes too, because it is the water. You can start to work that in toward where we put the brown color. A little bit more water and a little bit more paint. So there's still some of that green showing through, but not as much anymore. Then as I get closer to what's going to be the sandy area, I'm going to get a little white. I didn't rinse my brush. I'm going to move it over toward the blue slightly so it's quite light, so it's really a lot lighter, and I'm going to add just a hint of the burnt sienna. I'm starting to move toward where the water is. There we go. A little more white, a little more blue. And I'm just going to start to do the same thing. Do a little bit more, I want a little bit more sienna so I can vary it a little bit. You can kind of work some of that into that blue area so it looks like they begin to come together a little more. Going in, picking up a little bit more of that sienna and blue and white. Then I'm going to come back into my blue, so the cobalt blue color, and some white. I'm going to come back in and just hit maybe where you think the water and the sand meet. And then I'm just going to dip without rinsing my brush just into the white, and maybe come back in and just hit some of those areas right where you think there may be some waves cresting. And again, a little bit more of my sandy color, so back to my blue mixture with mostly burnt sienna. And just hit it here or there. I'm just going to start to make this little pathway back here. Things still are a little light back here in the distance. All right, so we're gonna have to let that dry. I'm gonna go ahead and rinse my small brush, and then we're gonna come back and we'll start working with our angled brush. Okay, so we're gonna start to move forward into our grassy area here. So what I'm going to do is I'm using my angled brush, and I've mixed up some cobalt blue, yellow, titanium white, and just a touch of the red. A little bit more of that red in there. So you can turn your brush in any direction that you want. And we're just trying to give the illusion of some distant growth back here. And I'm gonna bring some of it up as though there may be some tall bushes back here. Get some paint off the brush. I'm gonna bring that up a little higher. Get a little more paint. I'm gonna add a little bit more blue in. I just add a little bit more cobalt blue. I'm just gonna come in and do the same thing here. Just dotting this in back here. There we go, I'm liking that better. Just need to get a little bit more blue in the mixture. And I want my path to appear as though it's going to go up behind these little growth, behind the growth of the grassy area. And I'm just pushing down, turning my brush, and turning it in all sorts of directions. And I'm going to pick up some more paint, and I'm going to come back on this side and do the same thing. I don't know that I'll have any high pieces on this side, but still some growth. Get some more paint, a little more water on the brush. Things in the distance, anything that you see always has a cooler look. So the cooler colors are what your eye sees. So I'm gonna go ahead and lay some of that paint down as I'm moving forward. I'm going to add a little bit more of my cadmium yellow to this mixture, so it'll turn it a little bit more green. And I'm just going to start to work that in. Same way, you can just pull up, you can scumble, get a little bit more blue, kind of work that in. So you just have varying areas of the greens and the blues. Get a little more water. I'm going to pick up a little more blue and start kind of working that in as well. Staying loose with it, turning your brush, getting some paint off. I got some more water, some more paint. And coming in, making sure I get my sides. Maybe work some of that back up in that area. And some more of that bluish green. Back, you want to make sure that you, maybe whatever color you pick up, you can work it back a little bit, not too far back, just so it looks like it's naturally occurring, a little mixture of all the colors. Get some more of this cobalt blue, yellow, and I'm going to start to add a bit more of this red to it as I come forward. A little bit more red, so it gets a little darker as we come forward. I've got almost all the paint out of the brush, so I'm going to come over here to my titanium white. I'm going to grab a little burnt sienna and a little bit of my red, and I'm just going to come in and just start a little more water on the paint, just seeing how this looks. I'm going to add a little bit more burnt sienna to that and just start brushing that across. And you want to make these strokes here horizontal, because if you start making them down, it's going to look like your path is falling off of your painting. So I'm going to get a little bit more of this. I'm going to add a touch of blue, so it's almost a purple, then add a hint of sienna to take it back a little, and some white. And I'm going to come in and this will brighten it up a little bit, but still keep a nice kind of little sienna. Blend that in, and again, it's just horizontal strokes. And we'll have some grasses and stuff coming in, it'll make sense. I'm gonna get a little sienna and just start working at it along the edge of my path here and pull it across. Work it along the edge and just blend it in. I'm gonna get a little more white. I didn't clean my brush out and pick up some of this Sienna purpley blue mixture and just start to bring it in back here a little more. And you want to maybe give a little bit of some of those shadows as you move forward. Get that lighter color back here. And then bring it forward a little bit. Make sure you bring some of it down so it looks like it's blending in and it looks natural, like it all belongs together. And maybe hit a little bit of that lighter color back here, just a hint of it back here. There we go. Get it between those little tree areas. So I'm gonna leave it with that. We're gonna let it dry. I'm gonna rinse and dry my angle brush and we'll come back for the next step. So now everything is dry and we're back and we're gonna put our little spirit box on our painting. So in order to draw this in, what you want to have or think about rectangles and rectangles that maybe have a little bit of a curve to them and half ovals. So what you're going to do is you're going to decide where you want to put your mailbox and you're going to draw a straight line down. And I've gone up, this is probably about maybe 3 to 4 inches from the bottom of my canvas. And I've just drawn in about 1 inch, the first line, and then about ½ an inch in, drawn the second line. And then I'm gonna put a little, about 1/4 inch, another little line, because we wanna make sure that this is the pole that's holding up our mailbox, that it's thick enough to hold the mailbox. And then from there, I'm gonna draw what looks like a rectangle. So if you draw a rectangle, so 2 long lines, and you connect them, but when you connect them, connect the back with a little curve. And that'll give you a nice rectangle sitting on top of your mailbox. And then here, underneath here, you want to have a little bit of a line that's going to look like there's so it's a little tiny rectangle down at the bottom. So it looks like the mailbox is sitting on another piece that's here that may go across the other way of the mailbox. So it looks a little solid. And then think of this as it's an arch, so think of an elongated oval. So now you're going to come up and you can come just about to where the top of your mailbox is there, and you'll just create an arch. And that arch is about 1 inch thick, and you want to recreate that oval down here. You may be wondering why there's a mailbox on the beach. For many years, my family vacationed on a beach where they had what they called a spirit box. And the idea was that there was always a notebook in the box with a pen. And you could come and you can write down anything you wanted in that notebook, just to leave it and stick it back in the mailbox. And so it's called a spirit box. You just leave your worries behind, or you write down maybe your hopes, your dreams for yourself, for your family, whatever it was. So I'm going to put a little something in here that maybe looks like just a piece of paper, a notebook, and you can just fill it in. So it's just a little square within the box itself. And then we'll come back and we'll put the lettering on the box once we get it painted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix up almost a silvery type of color to make this mailbox look like it's just been sitting out in the salt air and it's weathered. So I'm going to come back with my little round brush and I'm picking up some of my blue and red, and of course a little titanium white. And I want to warm that color up a little bit because I want to make sure that you get some of those browns in there. So I'm going to add some of my burnt sienna. So now it has kind of a worn look, and we're going to come in and we're just going to make little strokes to go along the curve. So it's like a reverse C, if you want to think about it that way, just to come in and fill this in. I'm going to add a little bit more white to it so that it isn't so transparent. And we're just filling in what we just drew. Right now we're just getting the box filled in, and we'll add highlights and everything to it once we get it filled in. It's going to be a little darker on the inside, so I'm going to add a little bit more blue and burnt sienna together, and I'm going to put that on the inside around where my little letter, or I'm going to put it around where my notebook is. And I'll come back to that lighter color and we'll fill in where it's open. And then the little circle to indicate a little handle there. And down underneath is that little flat piece that I was telling you about. We need a little extra there, and it'll show up once we put some highlights on it. And then I'm going to add a little bit more white to all of this, and I'm just going to fill in this. It's like a piece of wood, an old piece of weathered wood. And when we go back in and add our highlight to it, we'll make it look a little more weathered, so it'll make sense. Okay, so we have that filled in. I want to make sure I get my notebook filled in, so I think what I'm going to do with the notebook is make it a little bit more purple. So I'm just going to mix just plain old blue and red, and just come in here. And it's a little bit more purple than the box itself, and the box is going to end up being a little different. So there's a little bit of that in there. You can tell it's a different thing altogether. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to rinse that paint out of my small brush. We're just going to start to add, while that's drying, we're going to start to add some detail into our grassy area. So I like, and this is a great thing when you're painting, just look at what happens maybe in a serendipitous way. I like how it's light here and then dark here, and I want to bring my eye to the mailbox, and everything's illuminated at the beach for the most part. There are shadows everywhere, so I'm going to leave the idea that there's sun shining everywhere and it's just hitting spots. So I'm going to come into my cadmium yellow, and I'm going to add just a touch of my blue. So it's a bright green color. And I'm just going to come in and just make little grassy strokes right back here where this little area is. And bring some in through where the dark area is. And I like this little light sort of area here. So I'm just making straight down little strokes, and I'm going to bring it to where just a little bit into this dark area here, but not too much, because I'm going to add some taller weeds as we come forward. So I'm gonna bring it down just a little bit into here. And I'm gonna bring some of that across this way. So at a diagonal toward the mailbox, so that our eye starts to come over here a little bit. And we will put some more of these in when we get our mailbox in all the way. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit more of the blue to that to darken it up a little bit. Still green, and just a hint of my burnt sienna. I'll roll my brush into that, get it nice and wet, and I'm just going to come in with that a little darker and a little more blue. I'm just going to come in and start hitting some of these darker greens. I think I'm going to add a little bit of my red to it as I come forward. There we go. And just kind of mix that in. I'm liking that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of my, I didn't rinse my brush off, so it's okay if there's some green in it. I'm taking some of my red. I'm going to add some burnt sienna, some white. And I just want to bring that sunlight onto the path. And a little more white to that. There we go. Wherever the sunlight seems to be hitting, bring that into there. A little bit more of that color on my brush. And then I'm going to do a little bit of the, actually going to come down into this purple color. So it's red and blue mixed together. And I'm just going to start to a little bit more. And a hint of burnt sienna. So I'm going to do blue, red, and a hint of burnt sienna. And just kind of get some dark areas thrown in there. Just a little bit. So again, I want some burnt sienna, a little bit of the red, more burnt sienna, and some of my white. There we go. Ah, there we go, I like that. And just mix that in. Then I'll come back into my blue and magenta, or blue, and I'm mixing some more of my blue, a little bit more of the red. Just want to come down here where I think that, mix some white into that, where I think my mailbox may be, possibly casting a little bit of a shadow through here. And then I'm going to get some of that off my brush, add some white, mix it in with my little sienna color, sienna and red. And I'm going to take that really light color, so I added a bunch of titanium white, and it's a little red, a little sienna. I'm just going to come back here and just get some of these lighter areas back here and back on my beach. Get a little bit more burnt sienna as I come down in through here and just kind of sweep that in. So since the mailbox is dry, I'm gonna grab a little bit of my white. So white is gonna be more like this color here. Red and blue with a hint of the burnt sienna. And I'm gonna start to make the top of this a little bit more vibrant. So I'm just gonna make those little C strokes a little shorter. And then I'm gonna grab some white and kind of go up on top of this and bring it down. And then I'll go back into my blue, red, burnt sienna. I'm gonna get a little more water on my brush, and I'm just gonna sweep that down and blend it in. Get a little bit of burnt sienna there. Just kind of work that in so it looks a little bit more weathered. So my brush doesn't have a lot of paint on it. And if you get too much paint on it, you may want to take some of that off. That's the key there. There we go. And that's making it look a little bit more kind of weathered, like it's been out there for a while, battling the salt and the air, some of the coastal weather. And I'm going to make a little shadow. So I'm going to take my darker color, so the red and the blue here with some sienna in it. I'm just going to make a little shadow area going across there. Maybe something's casting a little shadow. And I'm going to come over here. This is that little piece of wood that's up underneath there. Can do the same thing with that. And then I'm going to do a little white to that color. So I'm mixing a little white with what's on my brush. So that's the blue and the red and the sienna. And I'm going to put it right up under here. And then I'm going to stroke that down. So I'm just making long strokes on this side. So it's the bigger side of the pole. Get a little more water on my brush. And get a little bit more white. So it gives that, it's almost like a dry brush sort of stroke. There's not too much water on your, or there's not too much paint on your brush. I'm just bringing that down. And I'm going to get a little bit of that paint off my brush. And I'm going to come back up in here, make sure my brush is wet. And I'm just going to make little circular motions, blend that in a little better. And sweep it down. Get a little bit more of that white. There we go. All right, I'm liking that. And I'm going to go with that lighter color in through here. Blend that in. And then I'm going to put the darker color on this side of my little pole. All right, that's looking good. I'm going to blend this in a little more. Just making little circular motions. All right, and then I'm going to put a little hint of a little shadow hitting on maybe a little bit of this notebook that's in here. All right, so we know there's something in there. I'm not going to put a flag on the mailbox because there normally isn't a flag on this mailbox. It's either wide open or closed. Make sure that looks pretty weathered. I'm going to put a little bit more of a white highlight on the top edge here and blend that down. Maybe a little white highlight here on the top of the arch of the mailbox. And then I'm gonna have a little shadow coming up underneath here a little bit more so that it looks like that mailbox is resting a little bit more over. And then a little bit more of a dark color here. And I'm going to make it look like there's I'm just drawing a nice line along the pole there so you can tell there's a difference between which side of the pole is which. And there's that. Put a little highlight there on the little handle. All right, I think that's looking pretty good. All right, so I'm gonna rinse my brush out, let this dry, and we'll come back and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so we're back. I'm using my angle brush and I'm taking some of my cadmium yellow, some of my blue. I want a lighter green color. I'm just gonna add a hint of the burnt sienna to it, not too much. And some of my white. And I'm going to start with my angled brush. And I'm going to start by having my brush so that the tip is facing down and I'm backing away from the brush. And I'm just going to slowly pull up some grasses. And this needs to be fairly wet so it goes off the brush a little easy. And I want them to be pretty tall. And then I'm going to add a little bit more blue to this. So I want it to get a little darker on the green side, a little more cadmium. So I mixed up a little bit more of the blue and the burnt sienna, making it a little bit more dark. And I'm going to come down from the bottom and just flick up some darker grasses. And if it picks up some of that yellow, that's even better. Some of those lighter yellow grasses, it's even better. And I'm gonna make some of them come across the path. And I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna pick up some of the yellow first, get that on my brush, and get that coming off the corner here. And then some of the darker green color and get that mixed in. Go back into my yellow and just kind of mix that in. Some of these taller grasses. And more green, and just flip that up. Make some of these a little taller, and we're going to be adding some little seed pods in here and there as well. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to get some of this paint off my brush. And I want to go back into so I'm picking up some of my blue paint. Just a hint of my yellow, mostly blue. I just want to come back in and maybe hit that back here. Just a little bit throughout. Get some of those darker colors in here and there, not everywhere. And I'm going to lighten it up a little bit. So I'm taking that same color and just adding some of my titanium white to it. Get some of that paint off my brush. And we'll just come back in and maybe hit it, mix it in with some of those colors a little bit. I'm gonna get a little yellow in that. Take it back a little bit, there we go. and maybe even hit it back, a little back tree area, like maybe there's a little bit more sunlight back through there. A little bit more yellow in that. There we go. And the same thing over here. Make that a little darker. Come back into my blue. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to get some of the yellow, mix it into that blue, and just come in and hit some areas here and there around my mailbox. And I just have the brush so that the tip is up this time, and I'm just tapping it in, getting some of those grassy areas in a little more. A little bit more of the lighter blue through here. I'm going to get a little burnt sienna and mix it into this blue and just come in and hit it here and there, and you can rub that in a little bit just to indicate that maybe there's some sand coming through. So I'm going to let it dry. We'll come back, and we're going to come back with our small round brush and just add in the details. All right, so I have my small round brush. I've got my cobalt blue with a mix of a little bit of red in it, and I'm going to come up front to my painting, and I just want to hit some of these darker grasses through here. So I'm just pulling up some of the darker grasses here or there, just a little bit. And again, so I'm taking my brush, rolling it into that paint, and these grasses can come up and come across the path a little bit. So again, blue, a little bit of the red, roll it on the brush, and pull up some of these grasses. And I'm going to come over here to this side of the painting and do the same thing. Some of that darker color, that blue, and pull it up. There we go. And then I'm going to take some of that color and come back and just hit some areas with it back here to make it look like maybe there's some more grasses mixed in through here and through here. And I want to go ahead and take some of that same color, and I'm going to take just a little bit along the edge of my path there, and then pull up some of those grasses through there. There we go. Get some darker grasses in here, just mix them in. So get the color out of the brush really good. And then I'm going to come down here. I've got some of my yellow mixed with a touch of the red and some of my titanium white. And I'm going to roll my brush in, and I'm just going to turn my brush so it's just leaning in, and I'm just going to touch some spots to indicate. And I'm just going to turn my brush to get all the paint off. That maybe there's some little buds of some sort down there that are this orangey yellow color. And some here as well. And then I'm going to lighten that up by adding some white to it. So I just added some titanium white. I'm going to roll that in. And I'm going to do the same thing with a more white color. Just maybe a few down in there. And I just may even take some of this and just dot it along the way around my mailbox. Maybe just just a few back here, not too far back. And then I'm going to get that paint off my brush. And I just want white only, so I'm going to get my white. And I'm going to get my brush really wet. And I'm going to roll my brush to a point in that white paint. And if there's a little bit of yellow in there, it's okay too, because it's going to go on this purple. And I'm going to put Spirit Box. So I'm going to have a light touch here. Okay, before I do the box, I'm going to roll it in. Get a little bit of that paint off my brush, not too much, but my brush is a point. And then I'm going to take some of this pure white and just maybe come in and hit maybe just a few places. And I'm going to go back into my little bit of blue that I have left. I'm just going to come back here and pull up some blue-green grasses back here. There we go. Bring them into that path a little more. So I'm going to take a little titanium white, burnt sienna, and a hint of the red. I don't want it too much. I'm going to come back here and just maybe hit it back here just a little bit. So I want this to be a little lighter. I'm going to add a little bit more of the burnt sienna through here. And here. Then I'm going to add a touch of the red and just kind of bring that in through here. I want to get a little bit of the, bit more of the green in through here. All right, so I'm liking that. All right, I think I'm liking that. You can add any special touches that you like. I'm going to go ahead and sign the painting. I'm going to sign it down here, a little lighter green. All right. There you go. Thank you for keeping me company today, and I hope you created something special for yourself. Until next time, stay well. Bye-bye.